Welcome! In this series of short videos, we will look at topics for the PowerBasic Windows compiler. Today, we will begin to look at custom controls. One thing we haven't covered in our look at forms is the custom control. So let's go into our form designer and have a look. Here we have a very simple main form with a title, a description and an exit button. If we look at the tools box, we'll see there is an item for custom controls. If we double click on this and position our custom control on the screen, we'll see it places a simple box on the screen labelled Custom Control 1. Now if we double click on that, we'll take the caption out and we'll leave all the defaults as they are, and we'll just try testing the form, and it gives us a square box on the screen. So this is where our custom control is going to exist. And we'll just save that and go back to our code, and we'll have a look at what that's changed in the code. So here is the code for our form, and down at the bottom we'll see that it's done a control add for a custom control and its location on screen. The custom control doesn't have a class name yet, but we'll cover that shortly. What we need to do now is to give our custom control a purpose. If you're writing applications and delivering these to users, users inevitably are going to raise issues on your code. When that's the case, it's always very useful to know which version of the application the user is currently using. But you cannot always guarantee that the user will always be using the most up-to-date version of the application. So it's useful to have somewhere in the application where the user can find out what the version number is and when the application was actually built. In many cases, this is in some help menu or on the main screen itself. So we're going to add a new library today to the beginning of our code. And this new library is called PB Version Info. If we have a quick look at that, here's our PB Version Info, and this is what's going to form up the kernel of our custom control. Within this library is a function to get the exe version. This will do two things. It will first of all work out when the time and date of when the executable was actually compiled, and it will also return the version number within the application if the application has a version number. So the first thing we'll need to do with our code is to make sure it has a version number. So in here we're going to paste in the code which will insert our version number details. So we're setting up a version number of 1.4.9.7 and we're inserting this into our resources with our company name, the description, the copyright, and so on. When this application is compiled, this information will appear on the details. So if we right click on the executable and have a look at properties and nip into details, we'll see that our version number information is now sitting in there quite nicely. So having got that in place, what do we need to do to get our custom control operational? Well, let's have a look at the dialog itself again. Now we've positioned the custom control on screen, but we haven't given the class name for our custom control. So if we slot the name I've set up for this custom control in here, this is a class name that when the dialog is launched will be loaded in. However, before we do that, we'll need to actually register the class. And in our version info library, I've created an initialize routine which is going to set up our class. We'll take a moment to look at this. Now in here we are setting up the SZ name as an ASCII 20 character string, and this is where we define the name of our class. We're picking up the instance of the handle we're actually in, and we're in this if block using the getClassInfoX API call. And in here we're pointing towards the procedure, which is going to be what triggers when our class is executed. and this option allows you to set the background color. At the moment I'm just leaving it as 0 as the default. And the final line of code in here is to register our class. So we need to call this right at the beginning of our code. So if we go back to our PB main function, before we call the dialog, we want to call that function to register our class. And once that's in place, we can now try running the application. And there are the details of our executable, the version number, and the date and time it was actually compiled. So let's look a little deeper at the custom control. So we've initialized our control right at the beginning of our application, and when the dialog is actually created on screen, we've defined the name of the custom control class, where it's going to appear on screen, and we've shown the dialog. In the main dialog itself, there's nothing at all special in the initialization handler or in the WM command section. If we look in the version info, we'll see in here the code pointer is pointing towards this particular function. So if we have a look at the PB custom exe label procedure function, we'll see inside here this looks remarkably like the event handler in your dialog. It has an initialized dialog case, a create, a destroy, and in this case the important one is the WM paint. This is giving you quite a low level control of what can happen inside your custom control. Now in this case we're cutting down to the absolute minimum this one because the user will have no interaction with this custom control, it's merely to display information on the screen. So all we're doing is we're picking up the version number from our getExe version function and we're putting it into a buffer with a space at the end. And then we're grabbing the client area on screen and we're going into a begin paint API call. And in here we're setting the background mode as being transparent so we can see the background through it. We're setting the text color to grey, and we're using the draw text API to draw our text into that area on screen. And this simple block of code is enough to display our custom text into the text box. Now this is a very simple custom control. It has no interaction with the user whatsoever, it just displays information on the screen. But this is designed to give you a short introduction to what custom controls can actually do and how they actually do it. But that's it for today. Thank you for watching.